There have been rumors of a potential coup d'etat that will take place during or after the Trump inauguration, and I'm here to shut that kind of talk down and say this will not happen. Unfortunately, I don't have any body armor, weapons, or health supplements to sell you that usually goes along with this kind of fear-mongering and sensational reporting. We've seen it with Jade Helm, Grexit, Brexit, threats of Obama confiscating all guns, etc. All I have is the truth to offer you. The too long don't watch summary is that every time any sort of overthrow threat comes against the government, even by its own citizens, it's quickly shut down and is usually violent. It happened in 1989 at Tiananmen Square in China, 1991 at Red Square in Russia, and here in the US in 1971 during the May Day protest in Washington, D.C. Now the full story. It all starts with the leak of CIA intelligence reports that Donald Trump engaged in obscene behavior with hookers while he stayed in Russia one time. This leak was meant to prove the illegitimacy of Donald Trump and fuel members of the intelligence community and protesters to attempt to forcibly remove Donald Trump somehow. Also, the head of the National District of Columbia National Guard, Major General Errol Schwartz, has been ordered to step down during the Trump inauguration at 12:01 while he is in the middle of commanding troops deployed to support and protect the inauguration. Is this because the general is not as ruthless as Trump wants him to be in order to quell civil unrest? So then Trump can install someone who won't hesitate to bring down an iron fist of justice down on the civilians at the inauguration. Or it might just be Trump demonstrating a show of power to let everyone know who's in charge now. Trump's the captain now. In Russia, 1991, a military coup was attempted by the famous Gang of Eight because they did not agree with Gorbachev's reform program and the new Union Treaty that he had negotiated, which decentralized much of the central government's power to the republics. So they used force, and tanks were seen rolling down Red Square, only to be stopped by the citizens who sided with the new government. This coup failed because the citizens were on the side of Gorbachev and decentralization of government power. Similarly, a majority of American citizens present at the inauguration will be on the side of Trump and making America great again, and will help guard against any type of CIA, FBI, or military coup attempt. Tiananmen Square, China, 1989. Party leader Deng Xiaoping believed protesters to be a threat that must be met with equal and greater force, while another top official, Zhao Ziyang, wanted to pursue a concessions-based strategy. Chinese citizens were protesting about a lack of free press, political corruption, poor job prospects, and lack of investment in education and other things. Ultimately, Deng implemented martial law and instructed soldiers to do whatever was necessary to stop the protesters. This quickly escalated into the military shooting and shelling citizens throughout Beijing and China. Hundreds of citizens were killed, and it's one of the worst examples of a government response to civil unrest. And to this day, it is heavily censored and serves as a warning in China. Unfortunately, Donald J. Trump praised the Chinese during a 1990 Playboy interview and how they handled the event, saying, "When the students poured into Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government almost blew it. Then they were vicious. They were perceived as weak, as being spit on by the rest of the world." Ooh, misquoted that. When the students poured into Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government almost blew it. Then they were vicious, they were horrible, but they put it down with strength. That shows you the power of strength. Our country is right now perceived as weak, as being spit on by the rest of the world. And he's continued that rhetoric today, saying that the U.S. is still weak and pathetic. That's not good to hear. And finally, here at home in the good old US of A, 1971 May Day protest. This plays out like a movie and is a black spot in America's past because of how the government handled it, leading to the largest mass arrest in U.S. history. Much like the Disrupt J20 protesters today are planning, there were protesters in Washington, D.C. in the 1970s who believed that previous nonviolent methods to protest the war in Iraq, the war in Vietnam, were no longer working, and they resolved to forcibly stop the government. They too planned blockades throughout the city and even used large balloons tied to thick cables in order to prevent low-flying government helicopters from disrupting them. In the early hours of May 3rd, 1971, on the third day of the protest, while the protesters were sleeping, the government put into effect a plan it had developed in the 1960s to combat urban disorders. I'll say that again. A plan it had developed in the 1960s, a decade before, to combat urban disorders. So when you hear talk about Agenda 21, Jade Helm, and other domestic military operations conducted recently, it's for events like this. And they've been planning for a long time how to respond, even if they only tell you they're preparing for foreign combat or invasion by foreign forces. No, they're preparing for you. They brought in 10,000 federal troops so fast that transport planes were landing one every 3 minutes at Andrews Air Force Base. Every monument, park, and traffic circle had troops stationed there. And because the troops were human, U.S. citizens and about the same age as the protesters, the government rotated them frequently so that they wouldn't be influenced by their fellow countrymen. After all, it's kind of hard to point guns at your peers and neighbors, protesting against things that affect the troops also. By 8 a.m., 7,000 people had been arrested, and makeshift detention camps were constructed. In the end, over 12,000 U.S. citizens were arrested and detained. And this is a reason we should have absolute trust and transparency before we allow robots to roam our streets. Robots have no family, and don't hesitate with orders to kill. In conclusion, will there be a coup attempt during Trump's inauguration? No, not even close. But it makes for exciting news coverage and hype. I think we will eventually see a coup d'etat attempt here in the US, but it won't come from the citizens, military, or intelligence communities. As Eisenhower said during his farewell address in 1961, in the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic process. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together, and that we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific and technological elite. JFK also touched on similar themes when he talked about the military-industrial complex and secret societies in one of his most famous speeches. So I think when there is an eventual coup in America, it will most likely be a corporate coup, led by a powerful company attempting to take over. This is the plot of the 2013 movie Elysium. And also, as a spoiler alert, I think what we're going to see in Season 2 of Colony. They'll find out that the invaders is a scientific and technological elite or powerful corporation attempting to wrestle control from the government. Someone asked if I was keeping up with the playoffs. The only playoffs I'm watching are the playoffs for freedom that's happening right now in America. If that's something you can get behind, like, follow, and subscribe to be updated as we go from bootstrap grassroots to the Oval Office. Thanks for watching.